Senator Shaheen, followed by Senator Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, General Kane, welcome. Thank you for being here. Both of you mentioned in your opening remarks the challenges with our defense industrial base. And General Kane, as you think about that, how do lead times for the defense industrial base affect your ability to resource worldwide operations? And are you concerned about those delays?
Well, Senator, thanks for the question. And I recall our conversation prior to my confirmation about my opportunity to run a manufacturing business earlier in my life. And, you know, the importance of decreasing lead time in order to backfill the magazine stores if we were to get into a high-end conflict anywhere in the world will be really important. And as the Secretary and I consider what does the force of the future require for the munitions, I'm always thinking about lead time and what has to be true to solve the problem of shortening that lead time and, frankly, also lowering the cost to the taxpayer while assuring the quality that we need out at the tactical edge. So it's a key portion, ma'am.
Mr. Secretary, when you were asked about the impact of President Trump's tariffs under Section 232 on the defense industrial base, you commented that you're in the business of tanks, not trade. But you can't buy tanks without trade. And the administration's steel and aluminum tariffs are having an impact on the lead times for our defense industrial base. I've visited companies in New Hampshire whose lead time has gone from weeks to years because of those steel tariffs. So how does the department address that? I asked this question of Secretary Ludnick at the Commerce hearing because he was talking about the benefit of those tariffs, but in the short term, I asked him if he had notified DOD about the tariffs because clearly it's going to have an impact on our defense industrial base. So did the Secretary raise that with you and with the Department of Defense? And how did you respond, and how are you addressing the impact on DOD and the defense base because of those tariffs?
Secretary Lutnick and I have had multiple conversations about this, and I'm grateful that he is leading the charge on rebalancing our trade relationships. And a big part of one of the things, complicating factors we face at the Defense Department is critical systems, whether they're tanks or munitions, you name it, that are reliant on supply chains elsewhere. And rebalancing that trade relationship means you're bringing industry home, you're bringing capabilities home.
I understand.
Right now we have a lot of vulnerabilities
in the long term
on that.
How the benefits accrue, but in the short term, how are you addressing that issue? Because there are short-term impacts, and how are we going to address that if we need munitions or tanks or whatever it is, and we don't have the steel and aluminum because of the tariffs?
I would first say, Senator, that somebody had to stand up and say stop on this cycle of sourcing elsewhere and relying on supply chains elsewhere and allowing for unfair trade balances. And that's what President Trump and Secretary Lutnick have done. So somebody had to do that. But at the same time, yes, we are working.
How are you dealing with the short term?
In the short term, we're working very hard on the commercial side with allies and partners, other places where we can source the materials necessary as fast as possible, commercially available, to address any shortfalls. But we're grateful for the fact that those trade relationships are being right-sized.
General Kane, earlier in the conversation, ISIS came up and the resurgence of ISIS in Syria, given the changes there, are a real concern. How important is it that you think we maintain troops on the ground to address any potential resurgence of ISIS?
Ma'am, I don't recall the conversation being linked to any particular part of the world.
It wasn't.
Yes,
it was
ma'am.
Just about ISIS. But I'm asking you because
yes, ma'am.
Syria is the most likely place for ISIS to resurge, and we know that there are cells there that are, we've seen it in the last few weeks where they attacked.
Yes, ma'am. I'd be happy to sit with you sometime in a different setting to talk about the CT threats and my views on them at the classified level. I think I'm actually somewhat hopeful around the pressure that we have against ISIS in Syria right now, given the change of government there through a unique set of circumstances that nobody could potentially.
I agree. My concern is the withdrawal of U.S. troops would provide an opening to ISIS.
Yes, ma'am. And of course, I'll defer. That's a policy decision. They'll defer to the Secretary.
Let me just correct the record here before I close. I'm out of time, but Mr. Secretary, you pointed out that javelins were given to Ukraine during the first Trump administration, and I support that. But I would point out that he was impeached over holding up giving those javelins and equipment to Ukraine. So I think as we look at the record, we ought to try and be accurate about how we portray things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Capito, Senator Murphy, and then Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Hegseth, and thank you, General, and thank all of the men and women every day that serve us and